The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as knelt beside her rifle, methodically cleaning each component with the precision of a master craftsman. Her calloused fingers moved with practiced efficiency, dismantling the weapon piece by piece. The other recruits had long since abandoned their equipment maintenance duties, rushing off to breakfast or catching precious moments of sleep, but remained absorbed in her ritual. She had learned this discipline from her grandfather, a veteran who had fought in 3 different wars. "A soldier's weapon is not just a tool," he would tell her during their hunting trips in the mountains of New Mexico. "It's an extension of your soul. Treat it with respect, and it will never fail you when you need it most." Those words echoed in her mind as she carefully inspected the barrel for any signs of wear or debris. The military base buzzed with its usual morning activity. Drill sergeants barked orders across the courtyard, trucks rumbled past carrying supplies, and the distant sound of artillery practice thundered from the far end of the facility. Had been stationed at Fort Carson for 8 months now, part of an elite reconnaissance unit that specialized in long-range operations. She had earned her place through relentless dedication and an almost supernatural accuracy with firearms that had impressed even the most seasoned instructors. As she worked, her mind wandered to the mission briefing they had received the previous evening. Intelligence suggested that enemy forces had established a hidden outpost in the mountainous region 60 miles north of their position. The terrain was treacherous, filled with deep ravines and thick forests that could conceal entire battalions. Their unit would be tasked with reconnaissance, gathering crucial information about enemy movements and capabilities without being detected. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar burden. Had grown up in a military family, where service was not just a career choice but a calling passed down through generations. Her father had served in the Navy, her mother in the Air Force, and her older brother was currently deployed overseas with the Marines. She carried their legacy with pride, but also with the constant pressure to prove herself worthy of the family tradition. A gentle breeze stirred the dust around her boots as she reassembled her weapon. Each click and snap of the components fitting together created a symphony of mechanical precision. Had modified her rifle slightly over the months, adjusting the scope mount and trigger mechanism to better suit her shooting style. These personalizations were technically against regulations, but her commanding officers had turned a blind eye after witnessing her exceptional performance during training exercises. The rifle itself was a thing of beauty, a custom-built sniper system that combined cutting-edge technology with time-tested reliability. Had requested this particular model after extensive research, studying ballistics reports and field performance data until she found the perfect match for her skills. The weapon featured an advanced optical system capable of engaging targets at distances exceeding 1,000 meters. Those personal records stood at an impressive 1,200 meters during a particularly challenging exercise. As she applied a thin layer of oil to the bolt mechanism, reflected on how far she had come since joining the military. Growing up in a small desert town, she had been the girl who could outshoot the local police officers by age 16. Her natural talent with firearms had always set her apart, but it wasn't until she enlisted that she truly understood the difference between being a good shooter and being a professional soldier. The transformation had been gradual but profound. Military training had stripped away her civilian identity and rebuilt her into something stronger, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous. She had learned to move through hostile territory like a ghost, to read terrain and weather patterns like a scholar studies ancient texts, and to make life-or-death decisions in fractions of seconds. But most importantly, she had learned the true meaning of the weapon maintenance ritual her grandfather had taught her so many years ago. Every scratch on the rifle's stock told a story. There was the small dent near the butt plate from when she had used the weapon as a club during hand-to-hand combat training. A barely visible wear mark on the barrel showed where she had rested it against countless rocks and fallen logs during field exercises. These imperfections didn't diminish the weapon's value. They enhanced it, creating a unique bond between soldier and tool that could never be replicated in a factory or training manual. Finished her maintenance routine just as the breakfast bell rang across the base. She carefully placed the rifle in its protective case, ensuring every strap and buckle was properly secured. Tomorrow's mission would test everything she had learned, and she wanted to be absolutely certain her equipment would perform flawlessly when lives depended on it. Standing up, she brushed the dust from her uniform and gathered her cleaning supplies. The morning sun had climbed higher now, warming the air and promising another scorching day in the Colorado wilderness. As she walked toward the mess hall, couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Perhaps it was just pre-mission nerves, or maybe it was the intuition her grandfather had always told her to trust. Whatever it was, she was ready. The helicopter blades chopped through the pre-dawn darkness, as and her 5-person reconnaissance team approached their insertion point. Through the open door, she could see the jagged mountain peaks silhouetted against the starlit sky, their snow-covered summits gleaming like ancient monuments in the moonlight. The aircraft flew low and fast, following valleys, and to avoid radar detection while maintaining complete radio silence. Checked her equipment one final time, running through the mental checklist she had memorized during countless training exercises. Her rifle case was secured to her back with military-grade straps, the weight distributed evenly across her shoulders and torso. Additional ammunition, survival gear, communication equipment, and medical supplies filled every available pocket and pouch on her tactical vest. The team had been trained to operate independently for up to 7 days, living off the land and remaining completely invisible to enemy forces. Team leader Sergeant sat across from her, his weathered face illuminated by the faint glow of his tablet as he reviewed their mission parameters one last time. Was a 20-year veteran who had served in conflicts around the world, earning respect through his tactical brilliance and unwavering loyalty to his soldiers. His presence provided a steady calm that kept the younger team members focused during high-stress situations. The mission objective was deceptively simple: locate and observe the suspected enemy outpost, document their strength and capabilities, and report back without being detected. Intelligence suggested that hostile forces had established a forward operating base somewhere in the mountainous region known as Devil's Canyon, a remote wilderness area filled with caves, dense forests, and treacherous terrain that had claimed the lives of numerous hikers and climbers over the years. As the helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded combat operations. Her senses sharpened, her breathing became more controlled, and her mind shifted into the state that had kept her alive through previous missions. This mental transformation was something she had learned to embrace rather than fear, understanding that it was her body's way of preparing for the challenges ahead. The aircraft touched down in a small clearing surrounded by towering pine trees, their branches swaying in the rotor wash. The team moved with practiced efficiency, grabbing their gear and establishing a defensive perimeter while the pilot kept the engines running. Within 60 seconds, they had unloaded and disappeared into the tree line, leaving no trace of their arrival except for bent grass that would recover within hours. Took point as they began their ascent into the mountains, her enhanced night vision equipment turning the dark forest into a green-tinted landscape of shadows and possibilities. The team moved in single file, maintaining 15-meter intervals between each soldier to minimize the risk of casualties from explosive devices or ambush attacks. Their progress was deliberately slow, with frequent stops to listen for signs of enemy activity or environmental dangers. The first challenge came 3 hours into their march when they encountered a steep ravine that hadn't appeared on their maps. The chasm was approximately 40 feet wide and seemed to extend for miles in both directions, effectively blocking their planned route to the observation point. Called for a brief halt while he consulted his GPS unit and considered their options. They could backtrack and find an alternate route, which would cost valuable time and potentially expose them to detection, or they could attempt a dangerous crossing using climbing equipment. Studied the ravine through her scope, noting the rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation that might provide anchor points for a rope crossing. Her marksmanship skills had taught her to analyze terrain with the eye of an engineer, identifying subtle features that others might miss. She spotted a sturdy pine tree on the far side that could support their weight, positioned at the perfect angle for a diagonal descent and ascent. Without being asked, she began preparing her rifle for an unusual purpose. Attached a specialized grappling device to the barrel, a piece of equipment typically used for breaching operations, but adaptable for climbing situations. The device would allow her to fire a reinforced cable across the ravine with pinpoint accuracy, establishing a lifeline for the team's crossing. This improvised solution showcased the kind of creative thinking that had earned her recognition during training exercises. The shot had to be perfect. Too high and the cable would snag in the tree branches. Too low and it would fall short of the target. Calculated wind speed, distance, and trajectory while accounting for the added weight of the climbing gear attached to her projectile. She steadied her breathing, found her natural point of aim, and squeezed the trigger with the same precision she used for long-range engagements. The cable sailed across the ravine in a perfect arc, wrapping securely around the designated tree trunk with a satisfying thud that echoed briefly through the forest before being absorbed by the surrounding vegetation. The team quickly rigged their crossing system, using mountaineering techniques learned during specialized training courses that prepared them for operations in diverse environments. One by one, they traversed the chasm using mechanical ascenders and safety harnesses, their movements coordinated and efficient despite the inherent danger of the crossing. Went last, carefully retrieving her grappling device and ensuring no evidence remained of their passage. As she reached the far side, she couldn't help but smile at the elegant solution they had devised to overcome an unexpected obstacle. The remainder of their approach to the observation point proceeded without incident, though the terrain continued to challenge their navigation skills and physical endurance. They climbed over boulder fields, pushed through dense thickets of mountain laurel, and crossed several fast-flowing streams swollen with snowmelt from the high peaks. His weapon case bumped against her back with each step, but the familiar weight provided comfort rather than annoyance, reminding her that she carried the tools necessary to protect her team if they encountered hostile forces. As dawn approached, they reached their designated hide site overlooking Devil's Canyon. The position offered excellent visibility across the valley floor while providing natural concealment among a cluster of large granite boulders. Established their observation schedule while began preparing her rifle for its intended purpose, transforming the tool that had helped them cross the ravine into a precision instrument capable of engaging targets at extreme range. For 18 hours, maintained her vigil behind the rifle scope, watching the valley below with the patience of a mountain predator waiting for prey. The enemy outpost had revealed itself gradually throughout the day, starting with wisps of smoke from concealed cooking fires and eventually expanding into a clear picture of a well-fortified position housing approximately 30 hostile soldiers. Their camp was cleverly positioned in a natural depression surrounded by steep cliffs, making direct assault nearly impossible while providing multiple escape routes through hidden cave systems. Through her high-powered optics, documented every detail of the enemy installation. She sketched guard rotation patterns, noted the locations of heavy weapons emplacements, and identified what appeared to be a communication center housed in a camouflaged structure near the center of the camp. The intelligence value of their observations was enormous, providing military planners with crucial information needed to neutralize the threat without excessive casualties on either side. The enemy soldiers moved with military precision, suggesting they were well-trained regular forces rather than irregular militia fighters. Observed their daily routines, meal schedules, and security procedures, building a comprehensive picture of their operational capabilities. Most importantly, she identified several high-value targets among the enemy personnel, including what appeared to be a senior officer who conducted regular briefings near the communication facility. As the second day of observation began, noticed increased activity within the enemy camp. Vehicles arrived and departed with unusual frequency, and she observed several meetings between the suspected commanding officer and newly arrived personnel. Something significant was happening, and the timing suggested it might be related to upcoming military operations in the region. Made the decision to extend their observation period despite the increased risk of detection. The breakthrough came during the afternoon of the second day when spotted movement in the trees approximately 800 meters from the enemy position. Through her scope, she watched a lone figure moving carefully through the forest, occasionally stopping to observe the camp from different angles. The individual's movement patterns and equipment suggested military training, but their position was all wrong for enemy security patrols. Adjusted her scope's focus and felt her breath catch in her throat. The figure was wearing a tattered uniform that she recognized as belonging to their own forces, and even at this distance, she could see evidence of recent injuries. The person was moving with the careful deliberation of someone trying to remain hidden while desperately seeking help. This could only be a missing soldier from a previous operation, someone who had somehow survived behind enemy lines and was now attempting to gather intelligence or find a way back to friendly forces. She immediately alerted through hand signals, keeping her voice barely above a whisper as she described what she had observed. The team leader studied the figure through his own binoculars, confirming assessment and recognizing the tactical dilemma they now faced. Military protocol dictated that their reconnaissance mission took priority over rescue operations, but leaving a fellow soldier in enemy territory violated every principle of military brotherhood. The stranded soldier was Captain Sarah Mitchell, a pilot whose helicopter had been shot down 3 weeks earlier during a supply mission. Official reports had listed her as killed in action after search and rescue teams failed to locate any survivors in the crash zone. But here she was, moving with obvious difficulty, but still operational, still fighting to complete her mission despite impossible odds. Watched through her scope as Mitchell continued her careful reconnaissance of the enemy position. The pilot was gathering the same type of intelligence that team had been collecting, but from a much more dangerous vantage point. If she were discovered, the enemy would undoubtedly intensify their security measures and possibly relocate their entire operation, invalidating days of careful observation work. The situation deteriorated rapidly when spotted an enemy patrol moving through the forest in Mitchell's general direction. The patrol consisted of 4 soldiers armed with automatic weapons and equipped with radio communication gear. Their movement pattern suggested they were conducting a routine security sweep rather than actively hunting for intruders, but their path would inevitably bring them into contact with the hidden pilot. Faced an impossible choice. She could engage the patrol from her concealed position, using her rifle's superior range and accuracy to eliminate the threat before they discovered Mitchell. However, this action would compromise their own mission and alert the entire enemy camp to their presence. Alternatively, she could maintain her concealment and hope that Mitchell would detect the approaching patrol in time to evade capture. Through her scope, could see that Mitchell was focused entirely on the enemy camp and had not yet noticed the patrol approaching from her blind spot. The pilot was approximately 200 meters from the nearest enemy soldier and appeared to be preparing to move to a new observation position that would place her directly in the patrol's path. Made her decision with the cold calculation that military training had drilled into her consciousness. She adjusted her rifle's position slightly, chambered a round with movements so smooth they were virtually silent, and began calculating the complex ballistics required for her planned shot. The range to the nearest patrol member was approximately 900 meters, well within her capability, but complicated by the need for absolute silence and the challenging angle created by their elevated position. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind as she settled into her shooting position. Sometimes the hardest decision a soldier makes is not whether to take a shot, but when to take it. Had never fully understood the meaning of those words until this moment, when the lives of multiple people hung in the balance and split-second timing would determine the outcome. The enemy patrol continued their approach, moving with the casual confidence of soldiers operating in their own territory. Tracked their leader through her scope, noting his position relative to natural cover and calculating the precise moment when her intervention would be most effective. She controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, and entered the meditative state that separated elite marksmen from ordinary shooters. In the distance, Captain Mitchell finally detected the approaching threat and began moving toward better concealment, but could see that the pilot's injured condition was slowing her movement, and the enemy patrol was closing the distance faster than Mitchell could retreat to safety. The moment of decision was approaching rapidly, and prepared to demonstrate why she maintained her weapon with such meticulous care. The moment stretched like eternity as finger found the trigger. Through her scope, she watched Captain Mitchell stumble over a fallen log, her injured leg clearly affecting her ability to move quickly through the dense underbrush. The enemy patrol was now less than 50 meters away, their voices carrying clearly through the mountain air as they discussed their patrol route in low tones. Had identified her target, the patrol leader, a sergeant whose elimination would create confusion and buy precious seconds for Mitchell to escape. The shot would need to be perfect, not just for accuracy but for timing. She would have one opportunity to act before the situation spiraled beyond control. But as her finger began to apply pressure to the trigger, noticed something that changed everything. Mitchell had stopped moving and was reaching into her pack, pulling out what appeared to be a small electronic device. Even from this distance, recognized the distinctive antenna configuration of a military communication beacon. The pilot wasn't just conducting reconnaissance. She was preparing to call in an airstrike on the enemy position using coordinates she had spent weeks gathering from her hidden observation posts throughout the valley. This revelation transformed the entire tactical situation. turning Mitchell from a stranded soldier requiring rescue into a strategic asset whose mission could decisively impact the broader military campaign. Eased her finger away from the trigger and reached for her own communication equipment. Using hand signals, she alerted to the developing situation while maintaining her sight picture on the approaching patrol. The team leader quickly assessed the new information and made a command decision that demonstrated his tactical brilliance. Instead of attempting a rescue operation that would compromise their position, ordered the team to create a diversion that would draw the patrol away from Mitchell's location without revealing their own presence. Watched as two team members began moving through the forest, positioning themselves to create noise and movement patterns that would suggest a small group of animals or possibly a lone hiker in the distance. The diversion worked perfectly. The patrol leader heard the subtle sounds created by his teammates and decided to investigate, leading his soldiers away from Mitchell's position and toward the false target. This provided the pilot with the time she needed to complete her mission, but it also created a new problem for his team as they found themselves in the role of hunted rather than hunters. Maintained her overwatch position, tracking the patrol's movement through her scope, while her teammates led the enemy soldiers on a carefully choreographed chase through the mountainous terrain. The game of cat and mouse continued for nearly an hour, with the patrol always arriving at locations where the team had been but finding no concrete evidence of human presence. During this time, Mitchell completed her setup and transmitted a coded message that would bring devastating firepower to bear on the enemy outpost within hours. Watched through her scope as the pilot carefully concealed her communication equipment and began moving toward what appeared to be a predetermined extraction point several kilometers away. The enemy patrol eventually gave up their search and returned to their original route, but their heightened state of alert created additional challenges for his team. The soldiers were now actively looking for signs of intruders, examining broken branches and disturbed soil with the careful attention of experienced trackers. Teammates had to employ every concealment technique they had learned to avoid detection as they made their way back to the observation post. As evening approached, received confirmation through her communication equipment that Mitchell's airstrike request had been received and approved. A squadron of ground attack aircraft would arrive just after midnight, using precision-guided munitions to eliminate the enemy outpost while minimizing collateral damage to the surrounding environment. The success of this operation would effectively end the enemy's ability to conduct operations in this region. But the approaching airstrike created a new dilemma for his team. Their observation post was located within the potential blast radius of the planned attack, and they would need to evacuate to a safe distance before the aircraft arrived. However, moving during darkness across unfamiliar terrain while enemy patrols were actively searching for intruders posed significant risks. Spent the remaining daylight hours studying potential evacuation routes through her rifle scope, identifying natural corridors and danger areas that would affect their movement. Her marksmanship training had taught her to read terrain with exceptional skill, and she used these abilities to plot a path that would minimize their exposure to enemy observation while providing multiple options for concealment if they encountered hostile forces. As darkness fell, the team began their careful withdrawal from the observation post, packed her rifle with the same meticulous care she had shown during maintenance, ensuring every component was properly secured for the challenging movement ahead. The weapon had served multiple purposes during their mission, from enabling precision observation to providing the capability for long-range engagement when situations demanded lethal force. The evacuation proceeded smoothly until they reached the ravine they had crossed during their initial approach. The rope system they had established was no longer in place, having been removed to eliminate evidence of their passage, and they now faced the challenge of crossing the chasm in complete darkness while maintaining absolute silence. Once again prepared her rifle for an unconventional purpose, using the grappling device to establish a new crossing system under conditions far more challenging than their first attempt. Working entirely by feel and guided by her intimate knowledge of the weapon's capabilities, she achieved another perfect shot that secured their escape route across the ravine. As the team crossed the chasm for the second time, could hear the distant sound of approaching aircraft engines echoing through the mountain valleys. The airstrike was beginning right on schedule, and within minutes, the enemy outpost that had threatened regional security would be nothing more than a memory. Captain Mitchell's sacrifice and determination had provided the intelligence necessary to eliminate a significant threat, whilst team had gathered the supporting information needed to ensure mission success. The first explosions lit up the night sky behind them as reached the far side of the ravine, her weapon case secured firmly against her back, and her teammates moving efficiently through the darkness toward their extraction point. The mission that had begun with routine weapons maintenance had evolved into something far more significant, demonstrating how preparation, training, and split-second decision-making could determine the outcome of complex military operations. 3 days after the successful airstrike, found herself standing in the base commander's office, still covered in mountain dust and wearing the same uniform she had worn during the mission. General Hawthorne, a legend in military circles known for her strategic brilliance and unwavering standards, sat behind her desk reviewing the detailed mission report that team had submitted upon their return. The general was a woman who had broken through barriers in a male-dominated profession through exceptional competence and absolute dedication to excellence. Her reputation preceded her into every room she entered, and seasoned veterans who had served in multiple conflicts spoke her name with a mixture of respect and reverence that bordered on awe. Had never met the general personally, though she had heard countless stories about her tactical innovations and leadership during critical operations around the world. General Hawthorne looked up from the report, her penetrating gaze studying with the intensity of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions based on quick assessments of character and capability. The silence stretched for several moments as the general processed not just what was written in the official documents, but what she observed about the young soldier standing before her. "Sergeant," the general began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that commanded attention without needing to be raised. "Your team leader's report describes some unusual applications of standard equipment during your recent mission. He mentions that you used your rifle as a crossing device, twice, under conditions that would challenge experienced mountaineers. Explain your reasoning." Straightened to attention, choosing her words carefully as she recounted the tactical decisions that had led to their improvised solution. She described the terrain challenges, the time constraints, and the strategic importance of maintaining their observation schedule while adapting to unexpected obstacles. Throughout her explanation, she emphasized the team-based nature of their success while acknowledging her role in developing creative solutions. The general listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a pad that remained hidden from view. When finished her explanation, General Hawthorne asked a series of detailed questions about ballistics calculations, risk assessment, and decision-making protocols that revealed her own deep understanding of both marksmanship and military operations. The report also mentions that you maintained overwatch on an enemy patrol while simultaneously coordinating with your teammates to execute a diversion, General Hawthorne continued. During this period, you had a clear shot on multiple targets but chose not to engage. Walk me through that decision process. This question probed deeper into judgment under pressure, examining not just her technical skills, but her ability to understand the broader strategic implications of tactical choices. Explained how she had recognized that immediate action would compromise their mission objectives, while potentially failing to address the underlying threat posed by the enemy patrol's search pattern. General Hawthorne nodded approvingly as described her analysis of multiple variables including patrol behavior, terrain features, team positioning, and mission priorities. The explanation demonstrated the kind of complex thinking that separated exceptional soldiers from those who simply followed orders without understanding their broader context. "What I find most interesting," the general said, standing and walking to the window that overlooked the training grounds where had spent countless hours perfecting her skills, "is not what you did during the mission, but what you did before it began. Sergeant's report mentions that you spent additional time maintaining your equipment beyond standard requirements. Why?" Recognized that this question cut to the heart of military professionalism and personal responsibility. She spoke about her grandfather's influence, the lessons learned through years of training, and her belief that attention to detail in preparation directly translated to mission success. More importantly, she explained how proper equipment maintenance was an expression of respect for her teammates who depended on her capabilities. "Your rifle," General Hawthorne said, turning back to face directly. "Show me how you maintain it." This unexpected request transformed the formal office meeting into something approaching a practical examination. retrieved her weapon case, and began demonstrating her maintenance routine, explaining each step while the general observed her techniques with the critical eye of someone who understood that such details often determine the outcome of military operations. As worked, she fell into the meditative rhythm that had become second nature through years of practice. Her movements were fluid and confident, each action performed with the precision of someone who understood that lives might depend on the reliability of the tool she was preparing. The general watched in silence as disassembled, cleaned, and reassembled her rifle with movements that bordered on artistry. "When I was a young lieutenant," General Hawthorne said as completed her demonstration, "I served under a colonel who told me that military excellence could be measured by observing how soldiers treated their equipment when they thought no one was watching. He believed that the discipline required for proper maintenance reflected the character traits necessary for leadership under pressure." Carefully secured her rifle in its case, recognizing that this conversation was about far more than equipment maintenance or mission reports. The general was evaluating her potential for advancement, assessing whether she possessed the qualities necessary for increased responsibility and leadership roles within the military structure. "The enemy outpost you observed has been completely neutralized," General Hawthorne continued. "Intelligence gathered by your team and Captain Mitchell contributed to the successful elimination of a significant threat to regional stability. But more importantly, your mission demonstrated something that cannot be taught in classrooms or training exercises." The general paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle before continuing. "You showed the ability to adapt established procedures to meet unexpected challenges while maintaining focus on strategic objectives. You demonstrated mature judgment under pressure and the kind of innovative thinking that wins wars. These are the qualities I look for when identifying future military leaders." Felt a surge of pride, tempered by the understanding that recognition brought increased responsibility. The general's words carried implications that extended far beyond her current assignment, suggesting opportunities for advancement that would require even greater dedication to the principles of military service. "I'm recommending you for advanced sniper training at the Special Operations School," General Hawthorne announced. "Upon completion, you'll be assigned to an elite unit that handles the most challenging missions our military faces. The training will be extremely demanding, and the operational tempo will test every aspect of your character and capabilities." As left the general's office with her new orders, she reflected on the journey that had begun with routine equipment maintenance and evolved into recognition at the highest levels of military command. The careful attention to detail that her grandfather had instilled in her had proven to be the foundation for success that extended far beyond marksmanship, encompassing leadership, judgment, and the kind of innovative thinking that defined exceptional soldiers. That evening, returned to the training ground where her story had begun, once again kneeling beside her rifle for the maintenance ritual that had become both practice and philosophy. As she worked in the fatting daylight, she understood that the weapon in her hands was more than just a tool. It was a symbol of the dedication and excellence that would guide her through whatever challenges lay ahead in her military career.